his art and his flamboyance. He was selected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy to create a memorial to General Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee.
But instead of the single figure his sponsors had imagined, Borglum envisioned Lee with an entire army of figures marching across the mountain's face. Funding delays in World War I stalled work until 1923. In the meantime, Borglum considered the staggering question of how to actually do the work. 400 feet above the ground, on the sheer face of a mountain, creating figures as large as buildings. The first challenge was to transfer the design onto the mountain's face in proper scale. Borglum's solution was to create a line drawing of the design, project the drawing onto the mountain, and have his crew outline the drawing with paint. Critics said this technique created distortions in perspective and would never work. But Borglum was undaunted. With the design painted on the face of the mountain, he and his crew began to carve. They used small charges of dynamite to rough out the head of Lee. Then, with pneumatic drills and hand chisels, they took more than a year to hew the details into the stone. With typical flair, including a breakfast for dignitaries on the shoulder of General Lee, Borglum dramatically unveiled his first piece. The first head on Stone Mountain was Borglum's last. He and his sponsors fell into a bitter dispute. Borglum left the project and moved on to what became his most famous work, the carvings on South Dakota's Mount Rushmore. Though none of Borglum's work remains on the mountain, his legacy lingers. The scale of the project, as it was eventually completed, is a tribute to Borglum's ability to dream. The next sculptor on the project was Augustus Loopman, a man whose artistry and work style contrasted sharply with Borglum's. Loopman designed a new head of General Lee, and several months into the project, had Borglum's work blasted off the mountain.
Oh my God.
Loopman was very methodical in his work and realistic in his goals. He created a new design for the memorial which focused on a central tableau of primary figures. Unlike Borglum, Loopman spent very little time up on the mountain. He depended heavily on his carving crew for the day-to-day decisions. Many of the crewmen, like dynamite specialist Charles J. Tucker, had worked under Borglum. Nearly all of the men came not from artistic backgrounds, but from the stone quarry trade. They were experts with the quarryman's tools. The superintendent of Loopman's crew was George Wyler. He had long operated the quarry at Stone Mountain. He was very familiar with the mountain and with the demanding work of cutting granite. In addition to 2 blacksmiths kept busy at the foot of the mountain, repairing and sharpening tools, the crew averaged 12 men, 8 of whom were stone carvers. They used dynamite and hand tools to rough out the figures. Then Loopman's chief carver, Teodoro Bottinelli, went to work. Bottinelli patiently drew the face of Robert E. Lee out of the mountain and began the head of Jefferson Davis. But before the work could go much further, the project organizers lost their lease on the mountain. The carving again came to a halt. Loopman always hoped to return to the project. No one imagined that 3 decades, a Great Depression, and the Second World War would pass before the work began again. Still, Augustus Loopman and his crew left their mark on the mountain. Work began again in 1964, this time under the auspices of the state of